Tonight, we're going to talk about, and in particular to the high school students and the UC Blue Ash students, really talk about sort of four key concepts and principles that you should keep in mind as you go through your journey of finishing high school and finishing here at UC Blue Ash. And this is a time in your life where you just have a lot of questions about, what the future holds for you. And I, just like you, had a lot of questions when I was your age and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, what it would ultimately mean for me to achieve sort of some of the dreams that I had for myself. And I grew up not far from here in Hamilton, Ohio, in the 2nd Ward, in kind of a working class, poor to working class neighborhood. And I, as a youth, got into some trouble. I got arrested at a young age, and that's important to a part of the story I'll talk about later, and was not a great student. In fact, I graduated at the bottom of my class. I went to Badin High School, which is a great school, and I was at 150 out of 153. But my background, it's important, again, to some of the concepts we're going to talk about tonight, like developing a dream and a vision for yourself. And so coming from sort of my background with sort of the challenges that life presented to me and some of the questions I had about what I was capable of, I want to frame this discussion in really sort of four key areas. We're going to talk about your vision and you developing a vision. We're going to talk about your narrative or your story, and then your team, who you pick for your team, and then we're going to talk about execution. And these four things drove me to my current success and is what I keep sort of at my core of how I live my life now. I keep my vision at the forefront. And I have a story, a narrative about myself that I tell myself and that I repeat to myself. And I have a team, and I'm glad to say many of them are still in my life, and some even here today in the audience. And then the most important part is execution, and I focus on executing every single day of the week. So I want to jump into this first part. Vision is defined as something that you imagine. It's a picture that you see in your mind. Growing up in the neighborhood that I did, I love my neighborhood, I love the people in the neighborhood, but I had a vision as a young person to be a successful corporate attorney. I really wanted to be an attorney because of the trouble I got into when I was a youth. My parents told me, look, you did the crime, buddy. We're not getting you a lawyer. We don't have a lot of money anyway, so we're not going to pay for a lawyer. So you're just going to go in and take the consequences of your crime. And so at about 10, I started thinking, boy, I wish I had a lawyer. I wish I had a lawyer. So I literally became a part of my vision, me wanting to be a lawyer. But then also looking around, my neighborhood, I saw, some economic deprivation. I saw a lot of African Americans what I felt being disenfranchised. So I also had this vision of one day being a successful businessman. Now, when I was young, I didn't know what that really meant. I just knew they had money and that they probably could do stuff if they had money. I really, and that's why it says, the vision, it says it's something you have to see in your mind because it's beyond your current circumstances. And so I developed a vision of being a successful business person. Again, not really knowing what that meant. In thinking about vision, I want to just look at a brief quote from one of our time's greatest visionaries, the late Steve Jobs. And look at what Steve Jobs said about vision. He said, if you're working on something exciting that you really care about and you don't have to be pushed, he says the vision pulls you. And this is important because there are times when you develop your vision that you need something to pull you towards that vision. And so I think this quote is important. Similarly, there's another quote on vision that says, your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. And he who looks outside dreams, but he who looks inside awakens. And so when you look inside of your heart to figure out what that vision is for your life, what dream do you have for your life, it will actually awaken you. These concepts are important because they dovetail into the other three principles that we'll talk about. The Bible actually says something even, I think, more critical and more important. It says, without a vision, you die. It says in Proverbs, it says that where there is no vision, the people perish. And while that may not mean that you die physically, your hopes may die, your dreams may die, the dreams that you have for your life may die if you don't keep that vision in front of you. And so I'm spending the most time on this concept of vision because I think it's, along with execution, are really most important. So as you develop your vision for your life, as you get ready to graduate high school or get ready to move on to UC's main campus, ask yourself, can you remember the first time that you had a dream for your life that was well beyond your present circumstance? And then what was it? What did you see? And where do you think it came from? Because all of you have had some vision for your life at some point. What did you think you would get out of achieving the vision? And how does your vision benefit others? These are questions that I really want to encourage you young folks to think about as you, again, develop the vision that you have for your life. I really want you to pay attention to some of these questions that we raise here. So, again, I developed my vision to be a successful corporate attorney, to be an entrepreneur, and then to be someone who was, again, generous with my community, with my church, with those who are in my life. Again, as we talked about earlier, you needs to be guided by a set of values and beliefs. And for me, again, my values and beliefs stem from my faith, my Christian faith. And when Jesus was once asked, what's the most important thing about Christianity, he said to love your Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so for me, those are my guiding principles. Those are my beliefs, and that's what drives everything that I do in my life. And so after you get this vision, then you need to develop a plan to bring your vision to manifestation. But the next part, or the next step that's going to be important for you is to develop a narrative. And I'll call this your story. We all have a story, and you need to develop your own story. If you think about a narrative, it is a story or account of events, experiences, or the like, whether true or fictitious, which is interesting. Fictitious means of or relating to, consisting of fiction, imaginatively produced or set forth, created by their imagination. So think about vision, right? So here I am, a kid in a poor neighborhood. I didn't know any lawyers. I certainly didn't know any wealthy or successful business people, but I had a vision of those things were fictitious to me, right? They were part of my story. I started to develop my story. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a successful business person. I'm going to have friends who are billionaires, and I'm going to do these things. But that was an imagination. But I made it my story, right? And that became my narrative. When you get your story and you figure out what your narrative is, there are always going to be naysayers and people. There's going to be a counter narrative, I'll call it. There will always be someone that tells you you're not good enough, you're not smart enough. There are more African American men in prison than there are in college. Women don't know how to write software code. You're going to always have a counter narrative. That's why it's so important for you to have your vision and then to get a narrative or a story that backs that vision up that you can keep repeating to yourself, because I can assure you, whether it's your own voice in your head that actually goes against your own narrative, whether it's other voices that you hear from, or whether it's just circumstances, just bad stuff. Life is beautiful, but life is at once also very hard. And so you're going to have circumstances that crop up that may be beyond your control, that are actually going to be counter to the narrative that you have for yourself. And so for me, as a student here at UC Blue Ash, again, I was a D student at Badin High School. So how could I tell myself I'm going to go graduate near the top of my class at University of Cincinnati. I'm going to go to a top 10 law school. I'm going to get a great job at a great corporate firm. Then I'm going to be an in-house lawyer at a great company. And then I'm going to run companies, a bunch of different companies, right? my counter narrative certainly would not line up with that. There was nothing about my past, my background. It was something that I had to imagine. It was something that I had to set forth, as the definition said. I had to set forth in action. So develop your vision, create your narrative and your story and make it yours. And don't worry about the counter narratives. They're going to be there. And I'll tell you, don't listen to those counter narratives or those counter voices. Remember the truth that you're hearing today from me, and I'll show you during this presentation a true manifestation of keeping your narrative in your mind and how it becomes a reality, right? So as I mentioned, to pay my way through college, I worked a full-time job selling garage doors here in the Cincinnati area. And so my first year here at UC Blue Ash was most difficult because my schedule was as follows. I'd go to class from like 8 in the morning until 10 or 11, depending on the quarter or semester. Then I'd go sell garage doors from 11:30 to 12. And for the first 3 months that I sold, the owner of the company wouldn't give me leads generated. So if somebody called from a yellow page ad, sorry, they didn't have internet back then, but if somebody called from like a yellow pages, I couldn't run those sales calls. I had to generate my own business. So I would go door to door sometimes, hanging flyers on people's garage doors saying, hey, give me a call for a free estimate. And I did this every day, right? And so, and I mostly got rejections and I didn't sell much. And so what I want to just show you something, an example of a counter narrative here. So this here is a paycheck that I received. Look at this, December 12th, 1987. And my commission check was $27.10. I can either let this check, which is just something out there, it's a thing, define me, or I can define it, right? This check could say, you're broke, you're poor, you are not going to make it. You're not going to be a successful corporate lawyer. You're not going to be a successful entrepreneur, and you're probably not going to be able to go to a fancy law school making 27 bucks. Here's what I did because my vision was so important to my life. I worked as a janitor from 3 in the morning till 7 a.m. And I did this my first year of college. So I slept for that first year, maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, and could catch up as much as I could on the weekends. I go to class, sell my garage doors, go study, go home and catch 3 or 4 hours sleep. And then I cleaned the toilets and the pumps at the Shell station on Route 4. And I did that for my first year because I had a vision for my life about what I was going to become, and I had a narrative. And none of those circumstances really lined up with that vision or with the narrative. They were counter. So I decided that instead of this check defining me, the reason I kept it is that I said, I'm going to define you. I will never make $27 in a pay period again. I am going to make it out of the University of Cincinnati. In fact, I'm going to donate 1,000 times this amount one day in my life. I will donate this much and more, maybe even 1,000,000 times more than this. I'll donate that much. So even though this is what I had to live on, I'll be able to give way more than that away one day. And so that's the narrative the narrative that I had to put to that counter narrative. And you're going to have those in your life. I don't know what form they're going to come in, whether it's a friend or a family member or a circumstance, but you're going to have that, and you have to define that and not let it define you. The next very important part is you have to choose a team, because you can't make it alone, and you can't have $27 checks without friends and family members and people who are willing to step in and help you. So picking a team is important. Who you associate with is going to be very important, and you may have to cut some people loose in your life, and you may have to pick up some other people, but the point is you really need to examine who's on your team. Think about what these 3 guys did. So LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, they each gave up millions of dollars in salary so that they could be together, right? And if you recall, when LeBron did his great announcement, he said, oh, we're not just going to win 1 title, but 2 titles, but 3 titles, and 4 titles, and 5 titles, and he kept going on, because he had a vision for himself. He had a vision of what he could do with his team, and he had a narrative about how great the 3 of them would be together. And so through having a vision, through developing a narrative about how great they would be together as a team and how these two are best friends, how good of a friend he is to me and how I want to spend my life with him and my time. It's not just what you do, it's who you do it with, right? Those are two also very important things, what you do and who you do it with. So that's why spend a lot of time thinking about your team, who's in your life, and does your team buy into your vision of yourself? Does your team buy into your narrative? Or does your team, are they a counter narrative? And if they are counter, they probably shouldn't be on your team. And do you buy into their vision that they have for themselves? And do you help them? And you should be able to help. Each of these players helped each other in areas of weakness that they each had in their game. And so through that, they were able to become world champions. They won ultimately. So after you have your vision, after you create a narrative for yourself, and after you pick your team, the key thing is you have to execute. And execution is carrying out or putting into effect a plan, order, or course of action. Remember, we talked about vision as something that setting forth a course of action. Well, this is the actual work part of it, right? So the vision sort of set forth this idea of who you have for your future self. And then the execution is the part that's actually the only thing that can make it happen. You have to execute every day, right? And so one of the things that in order to sort of make it through the tough time period of, certainly my first year of college, was I took things in sort of bite size. I said, okay, I'm going to get through my classes first. And then I'm going to go out here and try not to get chased by too many dogs as I try to sell these garage doors. And then I need to sell a garage door. I need to sell at least one today. And then I need to go to the library and I need to spend 5 hours, right? And then after the library, I want to get a little bit of rest. And so, but that was something I had to do every single day. And it's interesting that sort of foundation here, I developed sort of a mindset of winning in that way. And in that vision, in that narrative, it became a part of me. And so a counter narrative, I couldn't even hear. I actually remember a professor telling me at main campus that, Eric, don't take this the wrong way, but African American students have not historically done well at UC, at the business college. And in fact, they have not done well. They've done poor. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that's going to change. Well, when I graduated in '92, I was the College of Business most outstanding student, the #1 student by grades and every other metric, right? Because I had a vision, had a counter narrative, and I had a great team around me. But then the more important thing is I executed. So one of the things that you guys got a handout, this is my first year law school schedule. Because I was able to have, and I developed the habit of scheduling things when I was here at UC Blue Ash. But during my first year of law school, which law school was pretty difficult, this was largely my schedule. Now the handout you have has a cutoff at 11 o'clock, but my schedule actually goes until 1 a.m. So I started my day every day at 6 a.m. and I ended it every day at 1 a.m., right? But to me, that was really a break in comparison to my first year at UC Blue Ash, right? Where I only had a window to sleep between either 11:30 and 12 and kind of 2:30 before I had to go to the Shell station. So this was actually almost a little bit of walk in the park. So I took, what could have been a counter narrative to me during the time of my first year, and I said, okay, law school is going to be a breeze. So I'd do my devotion. Again, keeping my faith is important to me, so I'd have my devotion time. And then I'd go to the gym, and then I'd hit my first class, and then I'd study, and then I'd factored in breaks. You'll see that. And then I'd go to another class, and then I'd study, and I'd review, and then I'd study until 1 o'clock. And actually, most nights I actually studied till 2 a.m. I didn't want to scare you guys off. And you know what? You have to develop your own schedule. You don't have to have a crazy schedule like this. You figure out what your balance is and what works for you. But that's what I decided that I had to do. But this is called execution, right? This is about you making the hard choices. And I baked in things to have a life. I even baked in my party. And notice here on Friday night, after I was done, that was party. And then notice I don't get up so early on Saturday mornings, right? It's my recovery time. Also didn't have my devotion either. I guess I was feeling guilty. I left that off. But I did on Sunday. I left Sunday morning open to go to church, and then I could repent for all the stuff I did the night before. So, but this was my schedule. This was about execution. And all I'm telling you is that you need to get a little bit of order. And I'll tell you something else about execution. And it's a minor thing. I always thought it was a silly thing, but I thought about this for years. And then Admiral McCraven, who was a former chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, just gave a speech at one of the universities. And he said, a lesson he learned as a Navy SEAL, he said, rule number one, make your bed every morning. And I was like, I had that same belief. So when I was home, and my sisters will attest, I never made my bed, right? My parents would always yell at me for not making my bed. But when I moved out and got my little efficiency, the first thing I did every morning was make my bed. It's the first thing I do right now. Even when I've had housekeepers, I make my bed in the morning. It's the first thing. Why is that important? Number one, it's my first victory of the day, right? And I look to accumulate victories. So that's my first one. I have a place of order. I have a place where I can pray, and it's orderly, all right? And then I've accomplished something. It's small, but it's a win. And so you need to figure out how to accumulate wins in your life, right? And so the first one that I still do to this day, notwithstanding the size deals I work on, I make my bed every morning. So it's just a little simple tidbit, but something to think about. Here are the results of execution every single day. So you develop your vision. You developed your narrative, you ignored the counter narrative, you picked your team, and then you execute daily with the schedule I had and other things. But then you win. So you win when you clearly define your vision and develop a plan. You create and repeat your narrative. And I'm being repetitive for a reason because I want to pound this into you. I want you to really leave thinking about these 4 things. Then you choose your team to help you reach your vision and you help them to reach theirs. And then you be proactive about execution. Do whatever it takes to move forward. You have to execute every day. But when you do that, you win. When I was a student here at UC Blue Ash, bottom of my high school class, I said, okay, in order to be a lawyer, first of all, I have to get through college. I have to be able to pay for it. And then I have to do well. And then I have to get to UC's main campus. So here's my admission letter to main campus. So April of 1990, I got a letter saying, hey, Eric, you're in. Right? So that's a win, right? In addition to making my bed in the morning, I won. I got into UC's main campus. So that's an example of a win. Then I kept my vision. I want to be a successful lawyer. I'm going to be a successful businessman. I'm going to donate to causes I believe in. I want to help other people. So, and then I have my team. And so I decided, now I wanted to go to top 10 law school. Well, this is an admitted students letter to all the students for the University of Virginia School of Law for the class of 1992, around the same time period, April 1992, 2 years later. That's my letter saying, hey, welcome to UVA. So now I'm at a top 10 law school, which put me in a place where I could even, further expand my team and things like that. Now this next slide, I hesitate to show it, but you'll recall the commission check, which was my salary for $27, right? And you recall that was a circumstance that presented a counter narrative to how I saw myself. But I spoke to that check and I said, one day I'm going to give 1,000 times more than that. So I hesitate because I'm going to show you a statement from a church, in 2007, one of 4 churches that I supported. So I don't do this to brag or to show off. And I firmly believe the Bible when it says, the right hand should never let the left hand know what it's giving. So I never talk about my charitable work, really, ever. But I do this because I think it's important for you young people to see something, right? Because you've heard this story, but I want you to see, what following these steps can do for your life. And there's an example of me winning. And if you notice that, it's $25,000, 100 is what I donated to that church in 2007. It's interesting that it's almost 1,000 times what my December 1987 paycheck was, that I actually was able to realize through following the steps that I'm telling you that I was able to make a contribution of $25,000 to a charity that I like and I thought would help people. And so as you all prepare again to finish your high school, finish up here at UC Blue Ash, I want you to just keep in mind that keep your vision first and foremost, develop it, own it, develop your story. Ignore the counter stories. Remember what I told you tonight when the counter story comes up, because I'm telling you the truth. And then pick your team, and then execute. And when you execute, you will win. Thank you very much for your time.